Hi, everyone. I'm here with Holly Joseph, who is an Associate Professor of Language Education and Literacy Development here at the Institute of Education. And she does research in the field of language and reading development. We've met up so that I can ask Holly to tell us a little bit more about the importance of reading. Holly, welcome. It seems that we are frequently told how important it is for children to be keen and prolific readers. We know, for example, that reading can be vastly informative, that it can help us develop perspective, empathy, and of course that it can be fun. But many people would argue that TV programmes and podcasts offer those same things. What does reading offer that they don't?
Well, the main thing that reading offers is that written language or book language is different from spoken language. So generally, language in books is more grammatically complex. So, for example, it's more common to see the passive voice than the active voice in written language. And it's also much richer in terms of vocabulary. So there are some words that you hardly ever hear in spoken language that you'll come across in written language, even words that aren't that rare, like vociferous or soporific. You do hear them in spoken language, but they're much more common in written language. So the language in books is more complex and therefore provides a kind of a richer source of language, if that's what you're interested in. If you want, particularly for children, if you want children to develop their language and particularly their vocabulary, books are the best place to do that. Another thing is that many words have more than one meaning or more than one sense, and that's another thing that you find often in books, particularly older books, that have a different meaning or a different sense to the one that's more commonly used in spoken language. Mm-hmm. I was trying to think of an example of that just now, and I was trying to think of a book that everybody would know that would have language in that's more common in written language. And I remember the first sentence of Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, and the first sentence, you might know it, is, "It was a queer, sultry summer, the summer they electrocuted the Rosenbergs, and I didn't know what I was doing in New York." And just in that very simple sentence, you've got the word queer and you've got the word sultry. And probably most people, if you ask them what queer and sultry were, queer, they would have something to do with LGBT plus, and sultry, they'd have something to do with sort of passionateness or sexiness of a person. But in that sentence, the meanings of those words are not those. They're referring to a season and a sort of strangeness. And so what you get by reading is this kind of more nuanced and sort of multifaceted, I suppose, understanding of words.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Holly. And of course, that helps both with exam passing, later in life when looking at English literature exams and things like that, but also in general interactions in life, having a wider and deeper, more nuanced understanding of vocabulary helps people in their interactions and understanding and communication with others, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Would you say that this argument applies to all reading matter? Does it matter what children read?
Yeah, that's a really... Sorry, go on.
No, sorry, I realise I really want to put the emphasis on, does it matter what children read?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question because there's a massive push, as I'm sure you know, at the moment in schools on reading for pleasure, with the sort of emphasis on pleasure rather than reading. The emphasis on both. And so a lot of people think it's really, really important that a child decide what they read, because if you don't let a child decide what they read, then obviously that could turn them off reading, and that would not be a good thing that any of us would want. However, if you're concerned, there are many reasons to read, of course, but if you're, as a teacher or someone working with children, if you're really thinking about that child's vocabulary and their reading ability and their grammar and indeed their knowledge of the world, it does actually matter what they read. Not all books are equal in the sense of having that variety and depth of vocabulary and language more generally. And so I know this is for primary teachers, and I know that there's more to life than passing your GCSE exams, but my PhD student Beverly Jennings has done a really interesting study, a corpus study, and what she's found is if you want to prepare yourself for the GCSE English language exam, in order to encounter the kind of vocabulary that you're likely to encounter in a GCSE English language exam, which is an unseen reading comprehension exam, or partly, there are certain genres that you're better off reading than others. And those genres are older literature and poetry. And you know, there are many reasons to read other genres, of course, and of course people should read what they're interested in. But if you're reading, for example, all young adult fiction, much of that is dialogue, and much of it is kind of language that we use at the moment. They're very modern, they're very topical, and those are all great reasons to read young adult fiction. I have nothing against young adult fiction. In fact, I love much of young adult fiction. But if you're thinking about the kind of vocabulary and grammar that is going to help you to read the kinds of texts that you're going to encounter in your GCSE exam, or indeed to encounter in older literature, then you're better off reading Jane Eyre or Bleak House or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I guess that has implications then for the primary teachers listening to this, in terms of if we are going to support children to read a broader selection of literature, that they themselves as teachers have to have knowledge of what is out there and of the range of what's out there.
Yeah.
Can I ask you one last question? I imagine that some of our viewers might be wondering where audiobooks fit into all of this, because we've been talking about the importance of reading. Do audiobooks fulfill the same purposes as written books? Is it sensible for children to listen to audiobooks?
Yes, definitely it is. I mean, audiobooks and written books offer different things. Audiobooks offer everything that a written book does, apart from one thing, and that, of course, is practice with decoding and also exposure to the written forms of words. So early in the process of learning to read, it is, of course, absolutely crucial that children get lots of practice in decoding and recognizing written words. Without that, they can't progress. So that's really important, and beginning readers, and also children who have difficulty reading, they all need practice with that. However, for both beginning readers and children with reading difficulties, specifically dyslexia, sometimes reading can be a very off-putting activity, right? Because it's really hard. You often struggle to decode a word, or maybe you get it wrong, and you're probably getting extra intervention at school and everyone else can do it, and it makes you feel really stupid, and it could easily put you off reading, right? So one way to kind of combat that, I suppose, is to have audiobooks, so that child gets all of the goodness that a book can give you: vocabulary, grammar, knowledge about the world, entry into different worlds, and all of the adventure. They get all of that, but without this kind of really difficult activity for them, which is laboriously decoding word by word. So I think sometimes people think that audiobooks are more for maybe secondary age children or adults who are already excellent fluent readers, and they're absolutely fine for those people too. For those people, it doesn't really matter if you read a book or you listen to a book. But I think for children who are struggling to read, audiobooks can be really, really valuable, because they can give all the benefits of books without having that kind of pain and difficulty associated with written books.
Excellent. And of course, with the decoding practice going alongside in a separate
absolutely
of the day. For your time, Holly, and for your wisdom there.
Not sure about wisdom, but my pleasure.